Are we ready or what? I guess that means we're going. All right. Well, we have, no, I'm not going to do this today. I'm going to talk about Shavuot. As most of you hopefully know by now, it begins next Friday, this coming Friday at sundown. So at 7 o'clock, we will have our service. And this one's a real important one because this is the one where I read to you the 10 Commandments. I have to read them in Hebrew and I have to read them in English. It won't take very long. Most of them are just 2 words. I mean, they really are very short. So don't worry about that. But anyway, I'm going to talk to you about it today. I'm going to take you through it today because if there's anything we need to know for preparation, maybe it'll pop up here. And maybe it'll bring you a question or two you want to ask before we actually have the celebration. So, first thing that you need to know, the Feast of Shavuot, also known as Pentecost in the not so observant world. They call it Pentecost because there's Penta, 5. There's 50 days between Pesach and Shavuot. So that's where the name Pentecost came from. It didn't come from the Pentecostals being on the day of Pentecost in the New Testament. That did not happen. Anyway, this celebration is celebrated every year, has been every year, from the very time when the children of Yisrael were led out of Mitzrayim. That's Egypt, right? Did you know that the New Testament letters tell us that there were no Gentiles present with the Talmudim, with the disciples of Yeshua, because Yeshua had already been hung on the cross and gone into the grave and all that stuff. There were no Gentiles, no non-Jews present when the Holy Spirit was poured out on the day of Shavuot. Not a single one. And if you go back and you read Acts chapter 2, read it carefully. It says that there were Jews and devout men. Well, the devout men are proselytes. They're Torah observant people. There were no Gentiles there. Why would a Gentile be there? Just saying. Did you know that when God gave the children of Yisrael the Torah at Mount Sinai, the people could see the voice of God? And it says, it's in plural, the voices of God. And his words looked like lightning and dancing fire. It's the way it's described. Did you know that Yehezkel, that's also known as Ezekiel, saw the day of Shavuot spoken about in the letter of Acts in a vision? Did you know that Ezekiel's description in Hebrew is almost an exact match to the description found in the Greek text in the New Testament letter of Acts? Probably not, because you do if you've ever heard me teach this before, but otherwise you wouldn't know that because the English translation of the 2 passages don't sound anything alike. So anyway, here's what happens. It's from Shemot, which is Exodus chapter 19, verses 1 through 20, which say, in the 3rd month, when the children of Yisrael were gone forth out of the land of Mitzrayim, the same day came they into the wilderness of Sinai. Now, remember, Midbar it's not a desert. The place that they went to, their journeyings and stuff, they were not deserts. They are deserts now, but they were not deserts back then. You cannot feed thousands of herds of, thousands of heads of cows and sheep and goat and God knows whatever else in a desert. Just throw that out there. Anyway, verse 2, for they were departed from Rephidim and were come to the wilderness of Sinai and had pitched in the wilderness. So they set up camp, and there Yisrael camped before the mount, or at the foot of the mount. And Moshe went up to God, and Yahweh called to him out of the mountain, saying, thus shall you say to the house of Yaakov, and tell the children of Israel. So you have two groups here. No, you don't. It don't work that way in Hebrew. The house of Yaakov is the children of Israel. Anyway, you have seen, this is God talking, telling him what to say. You have seen how I bear you on eagle's wings. Wait, what? I don't remember being on no eagle, God. What you talking about? Remember, idiomatic language. You've seen what where was I? I lost my spot, I think. 4, you have seen what I did to Mitzrayim and how I bear you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now, therefore, if you will obey my voice, indeed, if you will obey the words coming out of my mouth, these words, if you will obey my voice, that's the words coming out of his mouth is what I'm trying to tell you, and obey my covenant, then you shall be. Then, only then, if you do this, then you will be an acquired treasure to me above all people, for all the earth is mine. So it's all his. All of the people belong to him, whether they believe in him or not, whether they like him or not, whether they're worshiping some other God who had no son or not. And that's a direct affront to somebody. I'm just saying. But what makes the people of God different is that they obey the sound of his voice. What is the sound of his voice? He just told you. It's the covenant. What is the covenant? It's the witness of the words that God said, i.e., it's the Torah, it's the law. God said, thou shalt do this. Well, he didn't actually say that, but he said, you'll do this and you'll do that, and you won't do this and you won't do that. And what are you saying? We all said, yahoo, let's do it and obey it. But he's saying, if you do that, then and only then will you be an acquired treasure. God has acquired you as a treasure to himself if you will obey the words of his covenant. And that's all you got to do. Then he went on in 6 and said, and you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words which you shall speak to the children of Yisrael. And Moshe came and called for the elders of the people and laid before their faces all these words which Yahweh commanded him. So you can look at it and, all right, well, the words are basically telling us that Moshe went to the elders, and we know there were 70 elders. So he gathered these 70 people together and he told them, and they made the decision for the people. No, what it's saying here is that, he went to those people, he told them, and then they told all the people. And then they listened to what the people's answer was. They came back and told Moshe. And then now in verse 8, and all the people answered together and said, all that Yahweh has spoken, we will do. And Moshe returned the words of the people to Yahweh. So it was unanimous is all they're trying to say. It didn't actually happen at the same moment. There is one time where that could have happened, but this wouldn't be it. And Yahweh said to Moshe, behold, I come to you in a thick cloud, that the people may hear when I speak with you and believe you forever. And Moshe told the words of the people to Yahweh. And Yahweh said to Moshe, go to the people and sanctify them today and tomorrow, and let them wash their clothes. So it's going to be really important, I think, that washing your body and your clothes before you come to service on Friday might be a good idea. Verse 11, and be ready against the third day. For on the third day, Yahweh will come down in the sight of all the people upon Mount Sinai. And you shall set boundaries for the people round about, saying, take heed to yourselves that you do not go up unto the mountain or touch the border of it. Whoever touches the mountain shall surely be put to death, because God is a really snob of a person. And boy, you come around him and you haven't been invited, you're dead, man. No, I hate that people see God this way. I know I used to see God this way. It was like, man, he's just a murdering, marauding hillbilly or something. I don't know. I don't know exactly what I thought, but it just seemed like God just wanted to kill everybody. But that's not it. God is perfect and pure. You can't even look at God and survive it. Your eyeballs can't handle it. Your brain will just melt out of your ears. I'm just throwing that out there. It's just something we can't handle. And God is literally going to be sitting at the top of that mountain. So you'd better put a boundary around there, because if they get too close, they're not going to make it. It was for their protection. It wasn't so that God could have an excuse to kill them. God could kill them anytime he wanted to, if that were the case. Anyhow, so let's keep these things in perspective here. So if you go beyond that border, you're not going to survive it. So don't do that. That's why we put this little boundary out here, to keep you safe. Because when God says he's keeping you safe, there's one thing you can be sure of. He's actually trying to keep you safe. Verse 13, there shall not a hand touch it, but he shall surely be stoned or shot through, whether it be beast or man, it shall not live. Or I guess it's the right way to put that, so because the beast would be it and the man would be he. When the trumpet sounds long, they shall come up to the mountains. So that's how you know when this thing is getting ready to start. There's going to be a trumpet that's just going to keep blasting and blast. Somebody's got a lot of wind. It's probably the devil. Your devil, make yourself useful. I'm not getting anybody laughing here. Oh, well. And he said to the people, be ready against the third day. Don't go near your wives. And it came to pass on the third day in the morning that there were thunders and lightnings and a thick cloud on the mountain, and the voice of the trumpet exceedingly loud, so that all the people that were in and around the camp trembled. It scared them. And Moshe brought forth the people out of the camp to meet with God, and they stood at the furthest part of the mountain. And it says, and Mount Sinai was altogether on a smoke. This must be King Jimmy. This is not how I translate. It's not like me to use someone else's, but I can tell I didn't translate this. Altogether on a smoke. It actually uses the word smoke in the Hebrew a number of times, because it's trying to lay out this idea that this thing was dark, and it was thick, and it was loud, and it was apparently scary. The smoke ascended as the smoke of a furnace, and the whole mountain quaked greatly. So, the mountain is trembling at the presence of God. And when the voice of the trumpet sounded long and waxed louder and louder, Moshe spoke, and God answered him by a voice. Can you imagine that? At that moment, everybody heard Moshe say something, and then they heard God answer him. Got to hear the ambient voice of God. And so they all fell down on their face and they worshiped. It's not exactly what happened. And Yahweh said by him by a voice, and Yahweh came down upon Mount Sinai on the top of the mountain, and Yahweh called Moshe up to the top of the mountain, and Moshe went up. Well, I thought they were going to die if they went up. Now you got to remember, Moshe has already spent 40 years of his life with God. He is already purified. There has already been a sacrifice made. Oh, what chapter and verse is that, Rob? Well, if there hadn't been the sacrifice, if Moshe had not done that, he would not be purified enough, and he would have died if he'd gone up the mountain. So it's just adding 1 + 1, coming up with 4. No, I mean 2. All right, let's look at Ezekiel a little closer. Verse 1, chapter 4. Chapter 1, verse 4. It says, Ve'er, which it's the idea of seeing and perceiving and having knowledge of. Vehine, behold, ruach. This is usually translated as spirit, but it's the wind. It's of the breath of God. It's those things. So it's mostly it's wind. Sa'ara. Sarah, right? Sa'ara. A whirlwind. A storm. It's from the root that means it's shaking. Agitation by storms. Tossed to and fro. Said the word. Said the wrong word. Ba'ah. So that's from the word bow, which is to come. And then we got from Anaf, from the cloud, the great cloud of fire. Oh, but here's the thing you got to think about. Now, we're talking about God coming down and sitting on this mountain, and we get this idea that there's this thick smoke, and then when it starts to talk about fire, we begin to get this idea of all these flames and stuff. What flames? What was God burning? That's not happening, because you remember that the rule for the word, and hopefully, yes, it is the word esh. The rule for that word is when speaking of a man or speaking in understanding, to have a difficult way to explain this, they're not speaking of God as a man, because God is not a man. Man is made in God's image. But when you talk about God and you're using words that you would use of a human being, the rule is with this word esh is that we're not talking about flames. We're talking about passion. So God is unbelievably excited. And why would he tell them not to come on the mountain? Because they got killed? Well, think about it. When God entered into the covenant with Abraham, do you remember that? It says everything was dark, and Abraham, he cut up the animals, and all of a sudden there's this flame that goes in between the animals. And in the covenant, in that time span, they would cut an animal generally in half and walk between the animals. The first person who started the covenant would do that, and then the second person who agreed to the covenant would do that, and all that good stuff. Well, here's the thing. When God walked between those animals that Abraham sat down, he was so excited and so passionate about entering into a covenant, about just the idea of being able to once again have people in his presence and him to be in their presence, to be able to communicate with God in a face-to-face way. So excited God that when he got through the parts of the animal, there was nothing left but ash. And what do you think is going to happen here? This is the day that they're supposed to fully enter into the covenant with God, the covenant where God is literally going to spend the rest of eternity in the midst of his people, the ones who willingly want to live according to his covenant. What do you think is going to happen if they get too close to that passion? Just saying. I'm not sure why. Yeah, that's probably enough of all that. So here's my flowery translation, as I like to call it. And in his presence and in the joy of his light, my eyes lingered on the vision. And behold, remember this is, what's his name's vision, right? And behold, where is that? The violently shaking, storming, rushing spirit entered in from out of the hidden northern heavens. A great... my computer just stopped moving. I don't know what to do. I can't get it to move.
Turn it off and turn it back on, and now I have to do that work sometimes. Turn off. But the screen quit to maybe it's
Reach over there and rub your... Yeah. Oh, darn it, man, darn it. That's... Hit the little arrow button, see if you can get it to scroll down a little bit.
No, the screen's not blinking anymore.
Well, bummer. Bum, bum, bummer. Bum, 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 bum. Yeah, Donna Sister thinks it's getting turned off. Well, we kind of thought maybe that would happen. So anyway, this is Ezekiel's dream, I think. He was... Isn't that right? Okay. He's saying that his eyes lingered on the vision. Behold, the violently shaking, storming, rushing spirit entered in from the hidden northern heavens, a great veiling cloud and a raging fiery passion joined to it. What does that sound like to you? Those of you who have read the second chapter of Acts, what does that sound like? A rushing mighty wind blew through the place, and there was a fire that danced on the tongues of the elders among the Israel that day. It's the same thing. So that day obviously had been prophesied long before it took place. It didn't surprise anybody that was there. But the idea that they were all speaking in some gibberish is so wrong. Because it says they're speaking in tongues, right? And then what's the next thing it says? They're speaking in our language. And it names off all these different nations, the languages that were being spoken. Hello? And here's the thing. When the passion of God moved on these men, it moved on them not to talk to everybody in Hebrew, all these people who didn't speak a word of Hebrew. You got to realize they're in the Gentile court. Why? What's called the Gentile court. Why? Because it's full of Gentiles? No, because it's full of Jews who don't speak Hebrew. They're called Gentiles in the first century. In your New Testament, when it's talking about Gentiles, that's who it's talking about. It's not talking about non-Jews. This was not letters written to non-Jews. It's not letters written to Christians. They didn't exist in that time period. They simply did not. The reason why there's such a belief in it now is because when the stuff was translated into the English language, they began to put the word church into books and letters that couldn't possibly have had that word in them. Think about it. The word church comes from a word chiche, which nobody knows where that word came from. Nobody knows what its origin is or what it's about or why. You better get that ready, probably. Turn it back on is all I'm saying. They don't know the origin of it, but we do know that that particular word being used in the New Testament, that didn't happen until the 1200s CE. So you're talking 1200 years after the cross. That word is first used. 1200 years after the cross, the word Christian is first used. It's Christianos was first used in the 320s. 320s. How do I know that? Because Eusebius said that in his church history, supposedly. And he never talked about the church. He was talking about the philosophers. He was upset when somebody tried to have an opinion about the New Testament that wasn't a philosopher. You should read it. He complained about people saying things that weren't philosophers from one end of his book to the other. Philosophy, not Christianity, philosophy. And within a year, that had gone from philosophy to Catholicism. Christianity didn't come along until the 1500s. 1500s. Let's see, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, the 2000s, right? Wasn't that long ago. Just throwing that out there. No. No. There's not a lot that goes on for Shavuot. It is a time that it would be good if you can spend your day in prayer leading up to Shavuot, say 3 days, because you're preparing to be in the presence of God. And I think that the day's going to come when one of these Shavuots, when the fire comes back down. I hope I'm there when that happens. And I get to be a part of that, because that would be pretty awesome. And I don't think we need a temple standing in Israel for that to happen. I think it'd be good if that happened like maybe real soon, maybe this year, maybe this coming Friday, because America could use it. I mean, what would happen if that was all over the news? We don't know, these Jews, every Jew in America has got fire dancing on his tongue. That'd be pretty cool. Unfortunately, the Jews that will live according to God's law are few and far in between. But we might be surprised at how many there were. I'm going to pray for that. I am. I'm going to pray that God will put his fire on the tongues of every Jew that lives according to his law, even in the slightest little bit, and that every one of them get caught on camera. Just saying. So we need to be ready for Friday night, 7 p.m. Central Time. If you can be here, you're more than welcome to be here. If you can't be here, you need a picture. At the very least, we need to be able to see a current picture of you. It'd be best if you could just come on, show your face on the little thing, because you're supposed to present yourself. And if you recall, you're also supposed to not show up without a offering. Couldn't think of that. And by the way, we've already gone past the day before Shavuot is the last day that you have to give the offering that goes directly to your rabbi. We have not ever celebrated that one for fear that I'd lose my whole congregation. And I never could figure that one out anyway. I finally figured that one out this morning. It's called First Fruits. It starts the day after, not Pesach, but what comes after Pesach? Unleavened bread. So you got Pesach one night, unleavened the next night, and then the following night after that you have First Fruits. It's not a heavily followed one at this point, but First Fruits really should be, and I've known that for a while, just not been able to figure out where it fits and how it works, because it starts the countdown to Shavuot that's when First Fruits begins, and that's it's not an expensive donation. It's enough to make 2 loaves of bread. So whatever 2 loaves of bread cost, you can either send that kind of money, or you can make me some fresh bread and bring it with you. And I like chocolate bread with chocolate gooey stuff on.
Can you explain what you learned though about the burial and resurrection of first fruits? Or the presenting of
Next Saturday.
next Saturday?
Yeah, next Saturday is actually the last day of first fruits, so I'm going to teach that next Saturday, right?
Awesome.
Wait a minute. Yeah, that's right, because it's Sunday is the last day of Shabat, right? Yeah.
That's what it has on the
Right.
website.
So next Saturday, I'm going to go through that and go through the details, and we will be talking about Mashiach next Saturday, because it's a huge part of that one, and I just had to wait until I had it worked out, because I'm not going to get up here and teach you something and have to change my mind about it every year because I still don't understand it. That's just not the way I do things. So I now feel like I understand it. I feel like I can pull it all together. Been working on it for years, but just somehow I woke up this morning and understood it. So that's a good thing. Anyway, that's as far as I can take it this week. Sorry about the equipment failure, but we will do something. We'll either buy another computer or we'll manage to fix this one or get somebody to tell us what I'm doing wrong. I don't know. I know it's a good computer, but there was, I guess, some reason why it was at the pawn shop. There was just no way we don't have enough money to go down and buy a computer like that new, you know? So I thought I was being all brilliant when I went to the pawn shop. I've actually not had trouble with stuff from the pawn shop before. I just did this time. Hopefully our little guy in town can fix it for us and we won't have to worry about it because I really like this computer. I mean, when it works. Anything else I can share with you, but I guess we're waiting on
The blessing